All right, everybody, welcome to our 4-2 work together. You can see in our question asset section that we have our chart of accounts in case you need to take a look at that or forget any of the accounts that we have. And then let's read the instructions. It says Omar Boji owns a service business that uses the previous accounts, and we're going to post the separate amounts on each line of the journal that need to be posted individually, and we need to select a check mark when necessary. So a couple of things to begin with. Remember that the very first step when we're posting is to post individually, which means we're going to post anything that appears in our general debit or general credit columns. So what that means is that the first thing we're going to do is we're going to post our first line, which is for our Omar Boji Capital. So the downside about posting in MindTap is that you do have to do a bit of scrolling. And it's kind of annoying, but we're going to make the most of it because the flip side is, of course, that you would handwrite everything, and that gets to be very time consuming too. So we're going to scroll down to our general ledger, and we're going to open up our Omar Boji Capital. And the first thing that we're going to do is put our date, which is April 1st. Since it is the first line of the journal of the ledger, we do need to put our month and our day. The item is actually left blank. There's nothing we need to put in there. Remember that our post reference is actually our journal page number. So our journal page number is 1. So we put 1 in here. And then the amount for Omar Boji is a credit of $2,500. So we put $2,500 in our credit, and since that's our first line, our balance in the account is also $2,500. Now at this point, many people stop and they go on to the next transaction. That, however, is false because remember, there's a fifth step in the posting procedure, and that is to make sure that you put your account number, which is 310. That goes back up in the post reference column of the journal. That's our way of knowing that, yes, we have posted this line already, and we can move on to the next one. So do not forget to do that. That's very important. Our next transaction is for prepaid insurance. So we go down to our general ledger, open prepaid insurance. Again, first line of the ledger, which means we have to put the month, April 3rd. Item is left blank. Our journal page number is 1. And then this is actually a debit of $330. So we put $330 here. Our balance, since this is the first time we're putting anything in the account, is also $330 for a debit. And then again, don't forget to put your account number 140 up under the post reference column. So note again that we're not touching anything over here in these special amount columns. The sales credit, cash debit, cash credit, remember those are special. They are going to be in their own separate thing. We are only concerned about what's in the general debit, general credit right now. Next up is our supplies. So we open up our supplies account. Again, April 4th. Post reference number is 1. It's a debit of $160, which means our balance is $160. And then our account number is $130. Now this one looks a little bit different. Remember that all this signifies to us is that the supplies and the accounts payable right now, this is one transaction. So technically when we go to post our accounts payable for Ready Supply, let's go down here and open up accounts payable for Ready Supply. We put in April 4th because that's the date of the transaction. That just means that those two are together. Our journal page number is still 1. This is a credit of $160, so make sure you get it in the correct column. And now we have a balance of $160 in our accounts payable for Ready Supply. Again, account number is 210. Don't forget to go up and plug that in. Next up is a check mark. So remember, at this point in time, what the check mark signifies to us is that that transaction does not have a general debit or general credit. Both amounts are in special amount columns. So that means that we need to choose a drop-down menu here and put our check mark in because we don't post that individually. Those two are going to be posted as part of the totals for the sales credit and the cash debit column, which we will do in tomorrow's lesson. So next up is our April 9th transaction for accounts receivable for Dan Carroll. So we open up the accounts receivable, we put in April 9th, post reference is 1, we have a debit of 122, which means our balance is 122, and once again, account number is 120. We head up there and put that in our post reference column of our journal. Next transaction is on April 12th in rent expense. So we open up rent expense. Again, April 12th. Post reference is journal page 1. We have a debit of 260, which means we have a balance of 260, and our account number is 510. We bring that right back up to our journal and put that in the post reference column. Now, notice that our next transaction is once again for accounts payable for ready supply. So let's look at this because this is the first time that we're going to have a second transaction in our ledger. So a couple of things we need to pay attention to. First off, because it is on the second line, we do not need to include the month. So all we need to put is the date, which is the 5th. We still put the post reference as journal page number 1 because that leads that if we had an error here, it would tell us we need to look at journal page 1 to find the transaction. And now let's see what happens here. It says we have an accounts payable ready supply. Looks like it has a debit of $80. So we put a debit here. Now this again is where I said you need to remember what the normal balance of the account is. So remember that accounts payable is a liability account. So if we're debiting a liability, that means that we're reducing it. So we need to take 160 minus 80, and we're still going to have a credit balance of $80. Okay? Some people would put debit of 80 here, and then they would put 80 over here. That's not correct. Remember that the balance is the same thing as a normal balance in a T account. If we had an $80 debit here, that would mean that we overpaid our liability by $80, which we didn't do. We technically still owe them $80. So make sure that you get that correct. If you need to, use that cheat sheet that we made in chapter 2. That could be helpful for you if you're forgetting what your balances are. And then, okay, so get back in it here. We need to put our account number back up here in 210. All right, we have another one, second entry in an account in a ledger. So this is on the 16th for accounts receivable for Dan Carroll. So again, because it's the second line, all we need to do is put the 16th. We come over, we put the post reference as 1. This time again, we're getting a credit of $65. And what's happening here is this person, Dan Carroll, he owed us money, and so because he has paid us $65 of the $122 that he owes, we're actually subtracting that amount. So we take 122 minus 65, and we get $57. We plug that in the debit, and we go up and we put 120 account number up in our general journal reference, post reference column. So again, I just want to point out, too many times people will put this 65 and then they'll just put a credit over here of 65. I can understand why it's easy to do, because up until this point, all we've been doing is just taking the debit and putting the same debit in the balance. But that's because all of the things that we had journalized and posted up here, those are all the very first time that we'd enter anything in those accounts. After the first line, that account now always has a balance. So you're either going to have to add or subtract for each one after that. So just don't forget to do that. I can't stress that enough. Okay, and our last post that we're going to do individually is for Omar Boji in his drawing account. So we'll open that up. Again, here we are on the first line again, so we do need to put April 25th. Post reference is 1. We have a debit of 500, which means because this is the first line, has a debit balance in the account of 500, and we take our account number, which is 320, and bring that right up there and dump that in. So congratulations, everyone. You just posted individually for the first time. You can see we now have a fully filled in post reference column. That's when we say we have done our posting. That's what that means. You should always have that filled in if it says to post. So we've now taken care of all of our general debits and general credits. So go ahead and head over and do your 4.2 on your own. And then don't forget about your application and your terms and questions as well.